Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 716. My opponent kicked off here with c4, the English opening. And well, I went with my typical setup. I start with knight f6 to see if he's really playing the English. He goes g3, g3 or knight to c6 or knight c3 or even knight f3, indicate the English setup. But also sometimes white just plays d5 on that second move. I've seen that. And then you have to change the gears and play the Nimzo or something. But this is fine. We're in an English. And so I go for the symmetrical setup with c5. Plays bishop g2. And then I go d5, which actually is the top choice in this position. Kind of interesting. But this c5 and then d5, supported by the knight on f6, is something that can be played against almost any English, any style of English opening, any line of the English. There are a few lines where white gets in an early e4 and then you can't play it, but usually you can. And it leads to some different lines, so this is kind of my pet system against the English. Let's see, he took here, which in practice, it looks like knight f3 is the most common book in the opening, and then common move in the opening book, but c takes d5 is what I see most commonly in practice. And then he played queen b3, which is a pretty rare move. I just wanted to mention here that, if they go knight c3, that's the most challenging kind of move here. I just support the knight with e6. Although sometimes, when I look at this with the chess engine, sometimes it seems to prefer exchanging knights here rather than supporting the knight. But I've been doing okay with this setup. The other way to play this is to bring the other knight out first. Another way I've seen. And I just develop a knight. And then he goes knight c3, hitting my knight. And now I again play pawn to e6. But I just wanted to show this one idea here, which is you can actually take here and then play e5. And you've got some kind of a reverse Maroczy bind here going. And that seems to be okay for black as well. But I usually, in this position, just play e6 as well. And that is all right. Anyway, my opponent went queen b3. And we're just out of the opening book. Yeah, there's no moves in the opening book here. C6 or E6 here seems to be a reasonable response. He goes knight f3 now. We go knight c6. He goes knight c3. So we get the normal development after that early queen. But I am a little worried because there's now one more piece than usual attacking that knight, because I don't usually have to deal with the queen on b6. But at the moment, this knight is in the way of the bishop, and everything seems to be okay here. So I continue with bishop e7. He castles, I castle. And yeah, the chess engine didn't really find anything wrong with this particular setup either. Now he goes d3. And I go queen to d7. Careful to keep my queen in contact with the knight. And, I'm preparing to push the b pawn forward and maybe play bishop to b7. So I want my queen defending this knight too on c6 in case it becomes exposed. Let's see, he goes knight to d2 here. And now I finally decide to exchange off the knights. The chess engine tells me that I could have continued to just support my knight with a move like rook to d8, and that would be fine as well. If white trades here, I'll just get another pawn forward. This e pawn will become a d pawn. And I'll have a little more center control. So the chess engine likes black here. This is still also okay. Knight takes. Maybe b takes was a little bit stronger. And play something like rook b8 to get my rook off of this diagonal. Maybe prepare to push the b pawn all the way to b5, not just to b6. But he took with the queen. I go b6 here. Got a solid structure. I've got a defended knight. Got room for my bishop on b7. So I'm pretty happy here, and the chess engine likes black. So this seems to be a good outcome for this. Let's see, he goes knight to c4. That was his idea. He maneuvers the knight over to a good square. Go bishop b7, brings his bishop out to f4. Looking at these dark squares here, and you do have to be a little bit careful. The rook is sometimes a target. For example, if I had played rook to b8 earlier, but now I can go rook to c8. Seems fine. He goes knight to e5. And I just decide to trade things off here. I didn't really want to start retreating, and there doesn't seem to be any great options here. All these exchanges seem to leave Oops, he didn't take there. He took the bishop first, and then he took here. All of these exchanges and this pawn push here seem to leave black still a little bit better. So maybe white's dark squared bishop is a little bit cramped here. Let's see. He goes bishop to f4, or I could kick it again with e5 at some point, but I want to keep this pawn structure flexible for the moment. So I go queen to d5, getting my queen out in the center. He goes rook a c1. Let's see, bishop d6. Yeah, I decided to get rid of this dark squared bishop. I don't know if this was a good idea. I mean, it doesn't seem to hurt, but it didn't really help a whole lot. I was just worried. I had put all of these pawns on dark squares, and I was worried that this piece might not be so good in the long run. So I took this opportunity to trade it off. And so we get into, well, this is not yet an endgame because the queens are still on the board. So let's continue on. But it's a position with only heavy pieces. None of the minor pieces are on the board. So he goes queen to a3 here, looking at my a pawn. I defend it. He maybe has ideas of pushing his d pawn forward and exploiting a pin on the c file at some point, but at the moment that's not working. Let's see. He goes rook f to d1. That would support a potential push there. And I went rook f to c8. The chess engine doesn't actually like this move. It wants me to play rook to d7. I think maybe I'm just a little bit exposed here to some of these ideas. But the rook is defended, so I don't think he can push right now. Oh, the queen is hanging. That's the problem. So maybe he could push right away. And in fact, he does. He goes d4. So this I gave white a little bit of activity here, and I have to do something about my undefended queen here. I can't take the pawn. So I played queen back to e7, getting away from any discovered attack on the queen. And so he takes on c5. But all this doesn't amount to a whole lot. We just end up removing a bunch of pieces here. He takes with the rook, I take with the rook. And, I'm covering all the entry squares. I'm covering the a pawn. So it doesn't seem like white has accomplished anything. He tries to infiltrate with queen a6, but all these squares are covered. I bring my queen over to c7 to line up the battery here. And we have, this whole game has stayed in the range of about even. He drops his queen back to a4. I push on with b5, maybe kicking the queen around a little bit. He goes queen b4, and I defend with a6. So let's see, tries queen e4, just kind of a little poking and prodding. He is looking at the a8 square, but I didn't see any harm with that. And, I didn't want to move my king up. I mean, that's a possible idea, but then you always have to worry about the rook coming in here with the check. But he has to, of course, arrange that. He's got to get his queen behind the rook or on a diagonal looking at that square, which is not so easy. So I just pushed this pawn forward, gave him this check. That did force my king to f7, but I don't see as there's any way to exploit it here. Let's see, he went b4, kicking my rook, went rook c6, and then he went queen to d8. So this is still okay, but somehow it was better not to play this exchange, because this rook and pawn endgame seems to be a little bit better for black. I guess because I get the first move, I get rook c2 after the exchanges. So the chess engine is just recommending kind of sitting on the position with king g2. And maybe it's a little awkward for white because that queen really has no good squares. Maybe it could go all the way here and try and harass my h-pawn, but it's kind of stuck on the back rank. Anyway, so he played queen d8. I was a little worried about, back up here, I was a little worried about him playing rook to d8, but then I can penetrate with my rook and force a trade of queens if necessary. So queen d8, encourages the queen trade, and I go for it because, as I said, I get the first move, rook to c2. And even though there's a slight edge for black, this should still be fine. I don't actually win any material here. He can defend everything by playing a3 first. I go after the pawn. He brings his rook back, rook to d3 to defend. And let's say I'm trying to bring my king in. Want to keep control of this entry file here. And now he goes king g2. There's no particular reason for him to play king g2 here and give up the pawn. He could just play e4. and it would be very hard for me to make any kind of progress in this game. So king g2 was actually the first real blunder in the game. Up to this, it was all just kind of slight mistakes. I'm still within the range of about even. But well, now I have a pawn, and it's an endgame. They say all rook and pawn endgames are drawn, but well, you got to play them out. Sometimes you have chances. He goes king f3, hitting my rook, so I run back, and he gets his king active. So at the price of giving up that pawn, but he could have activated his king anyway. Yeah, I don't think I was able to keep his king back there. Okay, so I start pushing my pawns forward with g6. He goes h4. Go h5 to stop his pawns from coming forward. He goes f4. Now I take. The thing that makes this not so drawn is that there are pawns on both sides of the board. So I don't mind exchanging a few pawns here if I can end up with a passed pawn. So that's what I'm aiming for here. Let's see. I went rook f2 check here. I didn't want his king making too much progress. He went king e3, but this wasn't particularly successful. I should probably just go back. The chess engine says that the way to keep the advantage here is to play rook c2, and when the king comes forward again, check from this side. And that drives the king back. He doesn't want to trade rooks and go into a losing king and pawn endgame, and that gives me the chance to play g5. So that's the correct technique here. Rook to f5, the rook is kind of in the way of the pawns here, and so actually my advantage is decreasing at this point. Let's see, he plays rook to c3, so he can come over here and check. I bring my rook to d5 so I can block, and I played king to e2. Not sure. Oh, it's so he can bring his rook over and check from this side. And I played g5, and it seems like g5 gives white some drawing chances. Well, there was this long computer line here which supposedly keeps some advantage for black. It's hard to see that it really amounted to anything. There wasn't a whole lot of progress in that line, so I'm kind of dubious. I think you really need to do something, and if g5 leads to a draw, then probably the position is drawn anyway. Let's see, but his drawing technique would be to just start checking. King c6, rook c6. Let's see, I block with my rook, offering a trade, rook c5, and take here. And it seems like this position can be held by white. Yeah, it's got the rook looking at this pawn. Okay, so instead of playing that way, he went king to e3. Let's see, I went rook d5, he went king e2, I went g5, he went king to e3. Yeah, there we go. And I took here. Once again, the chess engine doesn't like this trade here. I guess because my pawns are somewhat vulnerable over here. And so this is still, this is pretty drawish right now. Let's see, I push on with f5. And he plays a very natural move, king f4. But king f4 is actually a losing move. Once again, the idea here is to just start checking and come around and attack things from behind. And, you know, with this active rook, his king in front of my passed pawn, you know, this rook can swing back and forth, harassing my pawns and checking my king, and I don't even know if I can defend the h-pawn. So it rates this as even. So this is a draw, most likely. But he played king f4, which is a very natural move if you're playing these endgames, because you are, you know, you're always encouraged to get an active king, and you're moving it forward, you're blockading a pawn, you're putting pressure on it. But yeah, it just does not work. There's for tactical reasons. After this check, the king has to go to g5, and then already here, the winning technique here is rook to g4 check, drive the king to the h-file, and then just drop the rook back. And now the white's king is stuck over here in front of the pawn, so this pawn can't become much of a threat, and black can start pushing this pawn forward. And well, I can't say for sure it's a win because the chess engine still just gives a you know, a positive score. It doesn't give a complete plan to a win, but at least I can see a winning path here, which is to push that pawn forward and force him to give up some material for it. Anyway, I didn't play rook g4 check right away. I played king e5 first. I was still trying to push this pawn forward. this gives him one last drawing chance. He can once again start checking and get a draw this way. But instead he went, let's see, king e5. Well, he started with the check, that's true. Rook c5, check. I went king back. And then here, he took the pawn. He should have just continued checking. And this is all still very drawish. In fact, he can get an immediate repetition because I don't want to really let go of that pawn. But anyway, he fell for this little trap that I had kind of set up here. He took the pawn, and then now the rook g4 check, which drives the king to the h-file, is even more deadly because I take his rook and defend my rook. And so he resigned at this point. So once again, another reminder, you always watch out for those tactics in the endgame, and hopefully some tips on the rook and pawn game there. So hope you guys like this. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon.